Welcome to My Psychedelic Roots, a podcast of conversations with people from a broad swath of lived experience to explore their psychedelic beginnings, or roots. What led them to start using psychedelics, what those early experiences were like, and how those roots have impacted their life's unfolding. My name is Amy Bartlett, and it is my hope that these stories, generously shared by my guests, offer perspective and insight into the lived reality of psychedelic experiencing, both the shadow and the light. And by hearing about how folks found their way to the psychedelic space, I hope that listeners of this podcast will have the chance to be curious about the resonances, contrasts, and connections that these stories might have with their own lived experience. So, whoever, wherever, and whenever you are, and whether you're well-traveled in this realm or just beginning to explore, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. In this episode, I was honored to sit down with my dear friend Katherine Kimbell, who is one of the founders of the Ottawa Psychedelic Education Network, or OPEN, which is our local psychedelic society here in Ottawa. Those who know her well often lovingly refer to Katherine as the Timothy Leary of Ottawa, since she's always bringing such enthusiasm for the healing potential of psychedelic substances, and is such a welcoming person in the space, always championing the importance of community and connection. Her story is both a unique one, having first discovered psychedelics at the age of 78, and hers is also a story that echoes the pains that so many people navigate in life, grappling with the loss of faith, confronting shame, and cultivating acceptance and forgiveness for others and for herself. She is an inspiring, insightful, humble, and delightful soul, and I'm grateful to call her my friend. And also I'm grateful that she was open to sitting down with me to share her story with all of us. And so, let's hear more about Katherine's psychedelic roots. Wonderful. So lovely to spend time with you, Katherine, as always.
Thank you, Amy.
I wondered if you wanted to introduce yourself. If someone wanted to truly understand you or to know a little bit about you, what's something that they would need to know or that you would want them to know?
It would be significant to some people, but not to all. But for some, roughly from my generation, I was raised as the second daughter of a Christian pastor in his family in a Protestant Christian church, and that profoundly influenced who I was then, and surely who I am now. Is that very intense influence of the Christian church, of the Protestant Christian church, on our family life.
And so thinking back to your childhood and your younger self before you started taking psychedelics, how would you describe your way of seeing the world? Obviously, it was influenced by your family dynamics. And so I'm curious, what felt true to you then?
Well, I was always a very curious person, but curious only within a narrow range. And so I was probably rigid and judgmental and arrogant. I didn't know that then, of course, but I think that would probably, in retrospect, describe me. Being good. Being a good little girl.
Mm-hmm.
Following the rules.
Mm-hmm. And where did those rules come from?
Oh, I think they came from English culture, which came from England, and the Christian church.
Mm-hmm.
Which affected many, many other people too, but not everybody.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned that your father was a pastor and Christianity was a big part of your childhood. So, when we think about psychedelics, we often will think about both the healing, the recreational, but also the spiritual side of things. I'm curious, when you were growing up, what was your relationship to wonder, to spirituality, to altered states of consciousness, to awe, maybe even to God, before you encountered psychedelics?
Oh, the reality of God was very important in my life, probably because of the church influence, but And so at the age of 10, I remember kneeling in my prayers as one dutifully did at nighttime before bed, God, are you real? And suddenly, yes, there was a great cloud high up in the ceiling, and the cloud spoke to me and said, I am. Ah, I knew God was real. I didn't ever tell anyone, but that guided my life in strange ways and got me through a lot of difficult years.
That is a big moment of faith, Katherine.
Yes, but there was no follow up. There was no
Mm.
source of follow up. I didn't know how. So nothing happened. And slowly, my awareness slowly diminished until 50, 60 years later, I met psychedelics. But we'll get to that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you had some profound experiences spiritually as a child. I'm curious.
One.
One,
Yes, this one. Mm.
um, you grew up at a time and you were around at the time when psychedelics was really becoming part of conscious awareness within Western culture. The synthesis of LSD in the 1950s, the publication around psilocybin mushrooms in the 50s as well. I'm curious, did you grow up or were you in that environment where psychedelics were discussed, either positively or negatively, or what was your perception of them during that time?
Nil, with one exception, I have a memory. It's very strange of one day, Maclean's magazine entering our house. This was in the 1950s. I was a teenager. And the headline across it was about the psychedelic use in Saskatchewan.
Mhm.
What's the name of the place? Oh, I can't remember its place. Waybird, yes, the marvelous research there. And I just remember that. But then, no, they had played no part in my life whatsoever. And then after I married and was raising children and was in Quebec City, it would be in the headlines occasionally of the Montreal Gazette that we would read. But I just believed the story that it was all false. There was nothing significant to it. So it played no part in my life whatsoever for the next many decades. I was sort of off the beaten trail uh, in Quebec City at that time, living a very narrow life within an English community, within a French community. No, psychedelics were no part of our lives.
Mm. And so eventually they did become a part of your life. And so was there a particular moment or conversation or experience that made you start thinking about what they were or what role they might play in your life?
Yes, many decades later, at the age of 78,
Mhm.
Justin Trudeau had just been elected 3 days before. And I was visiting a cousin in Toronto, listening to the CBC Ideas, and they began talking about psychedelics. And instantly, I knew this was major in my life. I had to find out what they were all about. My life changed in that moment. 9:05 on that night, listening to CBC Radio.
Wow.
And so as soon as I got home, I just started digging and digging. I sat hour after hour at the computer, one trying to find information.
Wow. How did those around you react to your curiosity, the sudden curiosity that you were experiencing?
Well, I had no friends to talk to about it, so I didn't. And no, my family, no, they weren't interested at all. In fact, they really thought it was pretty unwise of me. But they thought it was a very unwise move, but they politely did not tell me to stop.
Hmm. And when you had that burst of insight, I'm curious, Catherine, what did you expect or what did you hear in that? What was the offering that drew you to them?
I don't know what it was, but I just knew I must go in that direction. And in a sense that I'd been looking for this all my life, but I didn't know. I had been looking for this and I didn't know what this was, but they were called psychedelic. So I just started Googling and I found a conference. So I went to a conference,
Mhm.
found another conference, and that's when I met one man from Toronto who sent me friends in Ottawa, came to my door, and then one friend arrived at my door and opened up her hand, and in it were some dried psychedelic mushrooms, and I just about freaked out.
How did it feel to see them live in the flesh, as it were?
I unbelievable. What? They're pretty insignificant. These shrunken, gray, wrinkled things, but they contain some surprise. So she sat for me for my first trip. It's a few days or weeks later.
Wow, that's so special. So
Yes.
as we're moving into talking about your first psychedelic experience, I'm curious, just for fun, if your first psychedelic experience were a chapter in your life story, what would the title of that chapter be?
Finding the truth of myself.
Wow.
In that it focused on my relationship with my parents, that it was not conscious, and I was very surprised what came up, but I just lay there and cried over what I suddenly knew and felt.
And so maybe, Catherine, as much as you feel comfortable, maybe we could talk a little bit about your first experience, where you were, who you were with, what the atmosphere was like, how you prepared for it. Yes, or how did you move into that first experience? What?
Oh, well, this is my friend Margie who had brought me the mushrooms. So Margie sat for me. So I lay on the dining room floor on a mat, and she sat beside me on a cushion. And this was my first ever experience. And uh, I can't remember anything else other than being in touch with what I really felt about my parents that I would not have dared before acknowledge.
Hmm.
So,
And what, again, as much as feels comfortable for you, but what
well, I
what
could,
did you learn in
well,
your
you
first
see,
journey?
I'm going to be really honest, and you can edit this out if you feel it's necessary. Well, being clergy, I was not comfortable with them as clergy, with what went on in our family. Suddenly, I was aware that I was deeply ashamed of my parents, and I was ashamed of my shame. Woo, double. And it was just good to say that's what I felt all my life, and I didn't know, nor did I even dare to acknowledge it. So it was a wonderful first release. Because being clergy, in Protestant clergy, was easy to fall into a trap of self-righteousness and not be real. But then they had no ways of getting in touch with their real selves. Psychotherapy, I suppose it was not available to them. No, not at
Mm.
all.
And you had been in therapy for
Oh,
a year?
I had done 20 years of Jungian psychotherapy, and at the time, it seemed very helpful. But I realize now, never once did I get in touch with a feeling as deep as this. And so I thought, oh, psychedelics are worth years of therapy. And then when I had my second trip, my first trip with ayahuasca, about a year later, again, more profound insights that never, ever came to the surface in talking psychotherapy.
Mm.
However, I valued it at the time.
Mhm. Yeah, it can be valuable, but different. And yeah.
I did go back. Oh, well, yes. So I told my therapist that I had just learned about psychedelics and also holotropic breathwork. The psychedelics without psychedelics,
Mhm.
and I could see that she was very opposing. Oh, no, no, that's no, don't have anything to do with that. So instantly, I knew what I trusted, and I knew that I was going to go the way of psychedelics, and that was the end of the psychotherapy
Mm. Mm.
for me.
I'm
I
sorry that you
okay.
weren't supported in that relationship.
Well, yes, but that's the way she was a bit older than I. Well, that's all she could do. She hadn't had a chance to learn about them.
Yes. Yeah. So that first experience of learning about yourself, learning about how you felt, about your family, about yourself, about shame.
My parents, yes. Mhm.
Mhm. How did your first experience compare to what you expected it to be? Or what did you expect from that first experience? And how was it the same
I
or different?
I had no expectations because I had not ever met anyone who had done these things. Oh, except my sitter, Margie. So no, I had no expectations whatsoever.
And so, what do you think that first psychedelic experience was trying to show you? And did you understand it right away?
I understood it right away. I was very surprised that I felt this was my true one aspect of my true self. I was very surprised to find that this is what I really felt, but that I did not dare to acknowledge it all those earlier years. But then there was no resource to.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, there's been no one else that I could ever discuss, no one in the church I could ever discuss this with. No, it's remained a private revelation,
Mm.
but I'm grateful. And so then when I did may I jump now to my first ayahuasca trips?
Yeah, I
So
assume they connect together for you.
yes, I think they do. I went to Montreal to the Santo Daime community, and I was so grateful to be received by them. So this was my first psychedelic trip with them, with ayahuasca, which is a different experience. This horrible brew, and lying on the floor, and I lay on the floor and wailed and screamed and screamed and kicked and shook. But then when it was all over, I sat up and said, God, I asked you if you'd reveal yourself and nothing happened. I'm profoundly disappointed. And then the voice spoke, and the voice said to me, and it was God speaking, I have been here all your life. The block in not hearing me has been your own arrogance. More truth.
Mm.
Who
How
else
did
could have told me that but Mother Ayahuasca?
how did it feel to hear that voice again?
Terrible and wonderful, but mostly wonderful.
Mm.
At last, another chunk of truth. It wasn't the church, it wasn't other people, it was me blocking out hearing God. Not that God wouldn't speak to me. So I started on this slow journey to hopefully change my attitude.
Hmm. How has the meaning of those early experiences, how have those unfolded for you over time?
Slowly, slowly, I'm trying to practice humility. I don't know if how well I'm succeeding. I don't have anyone to say who knew me then and knows me now, but I'm just grateful to remember that most significant journey and just keep at it, recognizing the equality of us all.
Well, that's really
Mhm.
beautiful, Catherine. I know that you
Yes,
embody that a lot in how you move through the community and how much you care about others.
but I think the people who knew me some years ago would not say that. Alas, I haven't have no occasion to meet any of them to ask. I've moved around so much that I've just lost contact with those people, and so that's okay.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that, Catherine. So, Catherine, you had your first psychedelic experience at 78 years old and a very
Yes.
significant ayahuasca experience after that a year later. And, had some very profound insights and connection with the divine and with yourself. What's one thing you wish you had known before you had these first experiences?
Oh, well, I wish I had known that psychedelics existed and that they were a validly wonderful gift, well, properly used. But then I'm of the generation in which you see, I believe the statements coming out of oh other people that they're dangerous. So, but it would have been, I think, very helpful, say at the age of 21, even maybe before, in a carefully guided setting, supportive, to have started this journey. Oh my goodness, yes.
Hmm.
So I just hope that in time these materials will be available in a safe way and place and time for many more people who would like to try. Mm.
And do you have any advice for people who might be thinking about psychedelics or using them, whether young or further along in their life?
Well, I tend not to give advice to other people. I'm scared of it because I've learned not unless asked. But if they asked, I would say, "Oh yes, yes, please consider this wonderful journey in careful supervision with the right people, the right way, the right time, not for party fun, but for inner exploration and for spiritual growth." Yes, yes,
Mm.
they're just wonderful.
So looking back, do you think psychedelics entered your life at exactly the right moment? Or do you ever wonder what might have happened if they had come earlier or even later?
No, I've learned to accept what is. Yes. Uh, well, they weren't available. They weren't in my life. I couldn't find what didn't exist for me. So, yes, I guess there were moments of resentment. Why so late? But I'm grateful that at last I have found them. Whereas my children and grandchildren still reject these and will have nothing to do with them. Okay, I was open and ready. So, I'll just accept what happened as that's it. Yeah. It's not the
Well,
only way for inner growth, but it's one excellent way. Yeah.
yeah. And on that note, you really described that moment of hearing about psychedelics on the radio as almost a calling. And, we talk about a calling in a spiritual or creative sense. And I'm curious, do you feel that psychedelics called to you in some way, or was there a particular
Oh,
longing or question that they seemed to answer for you?
oh, absolutely. They called, but the universe pulled it all together. That there I was on that evening, open at the radio at 9 o'clock to begin, and 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 there was the talk. There was the program beginning, and they haven't repeated it since, as far as I know. It's a great mystery. And I view it as a divine gift, divinely orchestrated, and I am profoundly thankful. Uh, what else can I say?
Mm.
Um, and therefore, I met you, and the others of the community, and it's been what else can I say? But
Mm.
endless thanks.
Mm. Well, it's a profound gift to me to know
Yes.
you as well. So
Oh,
I really,
and I should say it's been a marvelous gift, but that the accident of Albert. Who's the fellow in Basel,
Hoff-
Switzerland. Albert
Albert
Hoffman.
Hoffman.
Yes, the mistake he made that he stumbled onto this and swallowed it. What a marvelous thing. Why have we waited so long? Well, I don't know, but that's the way world history has gone.
Hmm. So, Catherine, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you and exploring together your first experiences and how you came to psychedelics. And yeah, I'm wondering in closing if there's an important lesson that you've learned from your exploration with psychedelics, or a parting word that you would offer to people.
Now,
Hmm?
I'm not one for giving words of advice, but I am amused, saddened, and amused when I can. I bring them into the conversation as often as I can, and when I'm speaking with people my age, I am baffled at their almost immediate response of, "Oh no, that's dangerous." And I want to say, "Let me tell you what I've learned," but they're not open. So I'm grateful to have been given a chance to become more open
Well, it's
to new
wonderful.
information. And
Mhm.
thank you, Amy. I'm so grateful that I've met you, and I'm so grateful for what you continue to do.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. I'm so grateful to know you too, and so grateful for this conversation together. I learned more about you and your beginnings as well. This was really a lovely time to spend together.
Well, you are very welcome. And well, what more can we say? But thank you and
Mhm.
good night.
Good night.